Everyone, welcome to Ted Does Art demo number 4, and this one's called Fight or Flight. And it's an appropriate title, not just for the piece, but for kind of this internal struggle I was going through. I did this over the Christmas holidays, so I think this was the last thing I did in 2017. And I don't know, maybe because it was the end of the year, but I was doing a lot more reflecting about not only this piece, but more so where I want to be as an artist. And this originally was a more straightforward 2-point perspective sketch as a demo I had done in class for some first-year drawing students. And I decided to finally get back to it and turn it into something. And initially I was kind of struggling. And a little bit at the beginning, you saw me kind of paint some abstract buildings, and I just discarded it. And now I decided to just actually draw in the buildings. And it was at this point I was kind of, asking me, why am I doing this? What's the purpose of this? I mean, on the side, it was to show students something while at the same time doing something for me. But I think in a nutshell, what's kind of really influenced what my current work has been, some sketches I've been doing these days, is to really just get back to the simple joys of drawing and sketching. And this was kind of that transition towards that into the new year when I've been more methodical and intentional about that. So with this one, I remember I was doing the city, and then all of a sudden I didn't want to do it anymore because I was thinking, haven't done realistic in a while, or I haven't done photo bashing, should I do that? And then I stopped myself, and why am I doing these things? What's the purpose for? It's not for work or clients or anything. So I was like, I should just, do this for me. I mean, that sounds pretty obvious, but I think that's where the struggle came, was over the course of time. You kind of get pulled in different directions with the type of work and methodology and techniques and styles related to purposing it for school, purposing it for teaching, purposing it for clients or what have you, or just simply trying to expand my skill set. And after doing that for so many years, it's taken a while to get outside of that. And I think this piece was that transition where I was remembering, I did this really just for the joy of drawing. It's the whole reason I initially got started into this, over 2 decades ago. So this is kind of slowly that transition heading back towards that with this one. And so everything here I did draw out at first before coloring it in. And what you also notice is I will expand the scene, add more buildings, and tweak the perspective even more right there just to make it a little more dramatic. And it has its issues, obviously, because I didn't initially plan it that way. And that kind of is, appropriate to the struggle that I was going internally, not only just for this piece, but as I said, about my goals as an artist. So I kind of look at this with some kind of bittersweetness, I suppose, being the last one of 2017, but certainly happier with the current, more recent work I've been doing. And the thing that I find a little bit still not quite satisfied about this one is the characters. And I feel like every other character except the main characters feel fluid. And that was that transition to my recent mindset of going just with, keeping it very simple and enjoying the process of sketching. And when I look at this, I feel like that was coming through with the side characters. And I think it was because they were side characters, there was no pressure in making them stand out, and as a result, I was a little looser with the sketching of their posing. And you'll notice that when I get to one of the main characters, the fellow who's on the car, I struggle with him a couple times. I finished his line drawing, and then I went back to it. And it's simply because when I was drawing these other incidental characters, I was like, wow, these are a lot more loose and fluid. And, that was slowly finally getting to that mindset, especially as I mentioned in my most recent sketches of the past month or so. But this was the starting point. And again, a good reminder of this took a while to do the buildings, but I enjoyed it simply because I was actually drawing as opposed to painting or silhouetting or photo bashing or whatever. And that just really reminded me of the importance of not only enjoying the type of art or medium or subject matter, but even technique-wise. And I think that's what it slowly came down back to. Over time, I've been being more intentional about going back to the style or the influences that I enjoy, which is something more stylized and animated, continuing with a subject matter that I enjoy, science fiction, fantasy, and Asian culture and martial arts and that sort of thing. And eventually, finally getting to this point, well, here, as I mentioned, just slowly transitioning to now the technique of just simply drawing. And, maybe I'm slow at this, but it just took me a while to realize these various aspects of art in different stages related to my work and the spectrum that I do. And so, certainly the demos coming up after this one showcases that, where I finally realized, just bring this back to this return to sketching and the joy of just simply drawing. I think the other reason was this maybe subconscious pressure to make things look semi-polished at least. And because I get bored, rather than sitting there and painting something for a long time, it's just a matter of, well, what can I do as far as render and do it quickly? So the goal would be, if I don't want to paint as long, then I just need to get better at it and do it quicker. So that's kind of has been my mindset. But I think, again, that started to slowly over time interrupt or shortchange the joy of drawing. Even though at this point I am drawing, everything has line work here, I was still not quite there yet about revisiting that original joy of what brought me into this field in the first place. And so, it is what it is, and it's a reminder that as artists we're constantly growing, and the only way to grow is to continue to try and continue to draw. And I'm sure many of you have heard a saying similar to this one, kind of paraphrasing Tex Avery, where every artist has 10,000 terrible drawings in us, and it's up to us to draw them out. And so basically that idea of in order to actually start to remotely get better and see improvement, happens only after a lot of practice. And I feel that's true for sure, even more so now than ever. Because unlike the select few, I run the gamut of most artists where it doesn't come naturally. I have to work hard at it and just practice. But I think the key is just to kind of enjoy the process of it. So I definitely enjoyed drawing these cars. But again, it's still maybe it's caught in a little bit of this polish or pressure to make it clean. And that in itself isn't wrong, because even some of my current stuff, some of it still has fairly clean line work. But the difference is my mental state of just kind of being fluid and relaxed. And that's what I've been more kind of conscious of. And you'll see that more so in the demos, the next demo and the ones beyond. But this was, again, a good kind of transition towards that. Now, this whole thing took about, 12 to 15 hours. And that's a little longer than usual, because part of the challenge was also that I intentionally made it larger and higher resolution, because I wanted to showcase every asset. So background and farther objects would normally have been very quick and smooth, but because I did this at a larger scale, I put a little more time into that because I wanted to showcase them as separate assets, especially the cars as well as the characters. So here you see with this main character, I struggled with him, partly to putting pressure on myself to make it on model to a previous drawing that I did of him. And that was kind of my Achilles heel, because then it made my drawing a little stiffer, and it probably didn't enjoy it as much. Whereas even this little robot punk guy, I feel like he's a lot more fluid and a lot more kinetic, because, well, I was looser with him and I didn't put this pressure on making him a certain quote-unquote perfected look. And so even though the main character is done, I will revisit him. And so I think what's triggered it was this little police officer, and I liked how he turned out. He was a lot more fluid, not so stiff. And again, it's because I wasn't really overthinking it, mainly because he wasn't a main character. And so the trick was to remind myself I should be that way with everything. Don't think of it as, the less important characters, the support characters, I can just kind of, be not think about as much or be looser with. No, I shouldn't think that way. So here I am revisiting this character, and I still struggle with him. He did turn out better in the end, I think, for it, but I do still feel that he has this slight stiffness to him, lacks a certain kind of energy and fun that the other characters had. But again, it's part of this whole process. So here you see me kind of lining out more of some of the vehicles. And part of this exercise, again, was to show students that we learn all these rules, such as perspective grids and doing underdrawings and gestures, because it's like a roadmap to help us get to the final destination. More often than not, I notice young artists just feel this need, either out of some kind of pressure or maybe out of, to some degree, procrastination, where they want to skip steps and just get right to the final, but not realizing that you may save time in the short term, but you lose time in the long term because you're struggling and frustrated and erasing and things like that. So that's why I have those perspective lines there, just to kind of show, well, I should follow my own advice at least, and show them that I also will use it when I need to. Because no one, as I've mentioned, and I say this kind of as my motto to students, no one cares how long it took you to get there, they just care about the results. So it's not about going from a blank canvas to skipping steps and nailing a perfect image. It's even if it took 12 steps or more or less, do whatever it takes to get to the result you're looking at, but at the end of the day, to enjoy the process. And that's really what this little piece here reminded me of, was to enjoy the process. So I'm slowly getting there in this one, but definitely after this, in future demos that you'll see, that based on the work I've been in the past month or so, that it's definitely becoming more prominent in my mind and forefront, just to relax and be loose and not overthink it and not put any kind of secondary pressure or ulterior objectives, but just to simply enjoy the art. And for me, that means enjoy drawing. So even when I'm painting and filling in the colors, it's that same mindset I've been conscious of keeping. So here, kind of finally getting around to some more of the vehicles. And I did enjoy doing this stuff here. And because I spent a little extra time, made it larger, I was able to use some of these as separate showcases in my gallery. And so it does take a little planning, because ordinarily if it's just one image and that's it, the full image, then I wouldn't have spent as much time on some of the background or the characters, because they would be lower resolution. Even the buildings, they get blocked out by some of these vehicles and the Dino Bus and all that. But I did still want to showcase the environment and show stages of work as well as a demo to students. So I think that was also the struggle, because there was multiple kind of goals, I guess, in doing this piece, not just for myself, but for demonstrating to students. And sometimes you get kind of pulled in different directions as a result. So here's this kind of little sort of Bronto bus going on here. And the other thing was designing on the fly as opposed to doing too many iterations. This character I also struggled a little bit, again, because I was trying to stay on model with the previous drawing that I did of her. And I think she also suffered a little bit of some stiffness in the pose. I don't hate it, but certainly it's one of those things that we all face, where the longer we look at our art, the more we realize some of the mistakes that were there, what you could improve. And that's only natural, and that's a positive, because that means you're still growing and you realize there's always room to grow. So here, kind of putting this dude together, and he's kind of surfing on this car. So I was trying to keep it playful. The other thing that was challenging was the original sketch that I'd done for this was kind of a more straightforward modern day city scene. It was like a car chase with guns and all that. And I was like, well, I wanted to try to steer away and make this a little more fun. And how can I keep this action oriented and the challenge of doing that without necessarily focusing on violence or anything like that? So that's why I turned it into, instead of, guys on with a gun, to now he's got a phone and he's taking a picture. and keep some of the fun of it, and show that it's still possible to kind of make an engaging, exciting scene that doesn't necessarily involve fighting or things like that. I mean, I'm all into action movies and all that for sure, but as one thing that I've been being kind of more challenging myself about, both from a personal level and an artistic level, is it possible to make something kind of exciting without necessarily due to some kind of battle or something like that. So now that I've got the general foundation for all of these, the trick is now balancing color and contrast. And here you see me playing now with some motion blur. And here is the final. So we kind of look at the stages. These are the original thumbnails, and as you can see, it's quite different and a little more zoomed in. Did that about a year or two ago for as a demo to students. Picked this one, and here you see me fleshing out. So here you can sort of see again how much it's changed and the struggles I was kind of going with, and the joys and pains of kind of going with the flow. And here is now blocking out the cars and the characters. Here's where I started to, again, shift and change the perspective and zoom out the camera and add more to the scene, presenting some challenges along the way. Here we see kind of cleaned it up in the grayscale. And then here's what I mean where I took the time to make these a little more detailed so I can showcase them as separate images. So that was part of the payoff. So even if it took, 2 or 3 times longer than usual, if I was just basing it on the one full scene, now you see the breakdown of all these assets. So it actually ends up being pretty consistent with my other work in terms of time, where characters tend to take maybe 1 or 2 hours at most, and then cars are similar. So when you break it down that way, it didn't really take that long. So here you can kind of see it when they're all colored, and then I have to tweak the contrast and the lighting so that the characters pop out more, especially the foreground characters. And here's a bit of a close-up of them. So yeah, I mean, I'm pretty pleased with it overall, but again, don't kind of dwell on it, and I'm kind of moving on. And this, again, I felt was a healthy and necessary transition to being in a direction that I want to be now as an artist. So I hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, take care.